Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining the official launch of It's Now for Nature. My name is Eva Zabe. I'm the CEO of Business for Nature, and it's my absolute pleasure and real honor to take us through today's webinar. It's so fantastic to see many of you joining from around the world, popping that in the Q&A function. As Lucy has said, the chat is disabled for this webinar, so please do so in the Q&A. And also for spending your precious time with us to join this webinar. Before we kick off, I just actually wanted to take a moment to reflect on the difficult times we're living right now as humanity. Seeing all of these lives lost, the suffering, pain, the hatred, we can only wonder if we're starting to lose our humanity and maybe even our morality. But remember that there is no nature positive, there's no net zero, there's no equitable world without a foundation of peace. And I really feel like those of us who have the courage to do so, we should really take it as our responsibility to hold on to hope and to hold on to peace. So on behalf of everyone at Business for Nature and our partners, I just sincerely hope you and your loved ones are okay and safe. So despite this backdrop, though, I'm really excited that today we are launching our joint global business action campaign called It's Now for Nature, and it's supported by a new nature strategy handbook. Over the next 75 minutes, you'll be hearing much more about the campaign, about the handbook, how you can join the campaign, and we'll also hear from a panel of businesses, which is really exciting. We'll have time at the end to answer your questions. We might not be able to answer all of them, but they're very precious for us to know what questions we should be answering in the future. Put them in the Q&A box and also be sure to upvote your favorite questions. And if you're wondering, we are recording this session and slides will be shared with all of you as participants. This campaign is developed by Business for Nature. We're a global coalition of more than 85 influential partner organizations, as well as forward-thinking companies. Together, our aim is to drive credible business action and policy ambition to achieve a nature-positive economy for all by 2030. This is very much a joint and collaborative campaign, and that's really what we need right now. It's critical if we want to drive the scale and speed of business action. We know there's no business without nature and the services it provides, and we know that we're losing nature at an unprecedented rate. These declines are already impacting businesses, supply chains, operations, investments. But of course, the flip side, and I'm sure we'll hear about this in the business panel, is also the major opportunities that businesses have to innovate and transform. Now, last year, 196 governments adopted the Global Biodiversity Framework and committed to halt and reverse nature loss by 2030. And that's what we mean by the nature positive societal global goal. Some of you may have also seen Target 15 in the framework. And thanks to, I'm sure, many of you on the line working all together, we helped influence an ambitious agreement and an ambitious Target 15, which requires companies to assess and disclose, and importantly, to act on nature. So we can expect regulation to come even more so, and investors are also getting serious about the risks of nature loss. Some of you on the line might already be getting questions from investors related to nature, whether it's on what you're doing about freshwater, deforestation, pollination, regenerative agriculture, and more. And consumers, of course, are demanding change. Now, in this recent GlobeScan report, 9 out of 10 experts view the state of nature and biodiversity as catastrophic or alarming. But over 3/4 say that the private sector is currently poor in its action to protect nature and biodiversity. So there's obviously a gap there. They all do agree mostly, though, that companies need a public nature strategy backed by the CEO or the board. So now is the time for every business to create a nature strategy. And today, we're going to show how.
In time of crisis, businesses plan, innovate, and transform. It's in their nature. But nature itself is in crisis. Nature loss is a growing risk that cannot be ignored. Without all the services nature provides, like clean water, food, minerals, pollination, businesses cannot operate. This is an opportunity for businesses to step up and lead the way. 196 governments have sent an unmistakable signal to companies. We must halt and reverse nature loss by 2030. There is no time to wait. Regulation is coming. Investors and consumers are demanding change. The question for every leader: where is nature in your business strategy? Now is the time to create a nature strategy, a roadmap of how a company will contribute to a nature-positive world. A nature strategy will boost business resilience, reduce negative impacts, while strengthening sustainability goals and restoring and regenerating ecosystems. Nature is complex, but guidance is available now. The Nature Strategy Handbook is a step-by-step guide on how to write a nature strategy and where to find the most useful tools and expertise. The countdown to 2030 is on. Embrace this opportunity. Start your nature strategy today. Don't let later become never. It's now for nature.
Thank you so much. And I see that the poll already was launched, and we'd love to give you a minute to complete it, of whether you have a nature and climate, nature or climate, or neither strategy or plan. And as you respond, I'm already going to introduce our next speaker, Tom Maddox from CDP, who is the Global Director of Forest and Land and one of our key partners. And it's been such a pleasure collaborating with you and the whole team. Let's have a quick look at the results of this poll, please. Great. So that's a very positive answer, where we've got the great majority that have a strategy or plan on both nature and climate, and certainly climate. So what do you think about that, Tom? And then over to you in terms of your reflections on why does business strategy and disclosure, in fact, actually lead to action? Over to you, Tom.
Thanks, Eva. So I think the poll results look surprisingly positive, actually. I'm going to give you some stats that the bigger picture doesn't look quite as positive as that. So over the next hour, you're going to get very familiar with something called the ACTIV framework. Framework for how to respond to environmental challenges. It stands for Assess, Connect, Transform, and Disclose. I work for CDP. Our focus is the D acronym, disclosure, which is an essential step in driving improvement. So we work to support organisations to disclose their environmental performance. We now have the largest database on environmental disclosure in the world. This year, 23,000 companies disclosed their performance data to us. What I wanted to talk for these few minutes was what these data say about corporate nature performance so far, and how this new campaign and the handbook will contribute to this. So, what does the CDP data tell us about how the companies are performing by nature? At the moment, we collect data on two specific aspects of nature: on freshwater and impacts on forests, as well as significant impact on biodiversity. Now, this doesn't constitute a comprehensive coverage of nature. We're currently expanding to address that, but it does mean we've got 10 years of data on how companies are being performing on two key aspects of nature. And those data tell us two key messages. First of all,
Tom, sorry, I'm so sorry, just to interrupt you just really quickly. I think the sound is a little bit difficult. I don't know if maybe you can come a bit closer. Your audio is not super clear as it was before.
Happy to. Is that any better, Eva?
I don't know. Anything else you can think of that the...
Yes.
Is that any better?
Much better. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, my settings had switched.
Sorry, everyone. Yeah, no worries. Thank you. Thank you for those who flagged it too. So
this year we've had 23,000 companies disclose on a climate performance, but we've only had 3,800 disclosing on water and only around 1,100 on forests. Disclosures from the financial sector, a little bit more open to disclosing on wider nature issues, but it's still less than half choose to disclose on climate, water, and forests. And even for those that do disclose, that climate focus continues. So amongst the financial services, 95% said that the climate influences a company's strategy, but only 30% say the same for wider nature issues. So that's a stark contrast to the poll we had earlier. The second key message we get from the data is that companies are struggling to turn intentions and commitments into tangible action on the ground. So for example, over 30% of companies told us that they had board-level oversight and policies and commitments related to biodiversity, but only 7% are actively measuring their impacts and dependencies. So why aren't companies performing any better? I think historically there have been two key barriers. The first has been the question of, why is this important? Is nature really a significant business concern to me? And then the second is that even if that why is answered yes, then it's the how to respond that's been unclear. Thankfully, we're making good progress on both of those barriers now. So for example, on the why, we're now seeing the financial links with nature being made increasingly clear. We're hearing central banks, for example, talking about the role of nature in financial stability. We're hearing the World Bank talk about the role of nature in GDP. And we're seeing some really interesting economic modeling predicting financial impacts of nature loss on specific companies and investors at levels comparable to the financial crisis in 2008. At the same time, we're also seeing regulation coming in with the likes of the EU deforestation laws, the EU sustainability reporting requirements. We're also seeing progress on the how to act. So as Eva said, we finally got the Global Biodiversity Framework setting our North Star for action. We've also got science-based targets for nature in development. So they provide the methodologies for how individual companies can set targets within that global framework. And then we've got the launch of the TNFD. So that's a clear, comprehensive framework guiding companies on the steps that they need to take to set and respond to targets. So for me, the launch of the Business for Nature campaign and the handbook are really going to contribute more ammunition to bringing down those barriers. The campaign further highlights why action's needed, and the handbook provides clear guidelines on how companies can respond through strategies. So here at CDP, we're going to be looking forward over the coming years to seeing the results of both the campaign and the handbook filter through in terms of improved disclosure from companies on nature strategies, as well as improved performance on implementing those strategies. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Tom, and thanks for all the work at CDP. I mean, bringing together these interconnected challenges and hopefully getting nature higher up that agenda as well, alongside climate and with climate, will be very important too. So now it's my absolute pleasure to get into some of the detail. I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Michael Ofosuene-Wise, who's been leading a lot of this business action work, including the campaign, to explain more. And then he'll pass on to our wonderful colleagues at PwC UK, who've been supporting us as well. Over to you, Michael.
Thank you so much, Eva, and welcome everybody. It is such a pleasure to be presenting this campaign to you all today. We've heard from both Eva and Tom on the urgent need for corporate action on nature and why business strategy indeed leads to business action. So the justification is clear. Today, we are launching the It's Now for Nature global campaign with the aim to rally all businesses to act on nature and contribute towards a nature positive future by 2030. We want to use this campaign as a vehicle to encourage and enable companies to develop and publish ambitious nature strategies. This campaign, as you know, was developed by the Business for Nature Coalition, together with PwC UK as the knowledge partner. And we have also consulted extensively with our global network of partners and companies. On the next slide, you will see that the campaign and the supporting handbook build on the high-level business actions on nature: assess, commit, transform, and disclose, commonly referred to as ACT-G. Our colleagues from PwC will elaborate on each of these actions shortly. It also builds on the World Business Council for Sustainable Development's Nature Positive Roadmaps and many other resources to guide companies through each stage of the ACT-G process in developing a nature strategy. We have also made sure that it aligns with the sector actions to contribute towards a nature positive future which we launched in September together with the World Economic Forum and WBCSD. While developing the handbook, we received well over 250 comments across our network, which shows the broad consultation. And now the handbook is available in 6 different languages, including in English, in French, Spanish, Portuguese, Chinese, and Japanese. Through this new strategy handbook, which we will talk about shortly, we hope to encourage businesses and financial institutions to develop and publish a nature strategy. But this is a really long-term campaign running until 2030. And we know that companies will go through different phases. So as a first step, we're asking companies and businesses to develop a board or C-suite approved nature strategy based on the handbook and submit their strategy to the campaign through the website. We will elaborate on the submission process shortly. We hope to be able to share and amplify the number of companies who have developed a nature strategy at the UN Biodiversity COP16 due to take place in October 2024. So joining this campaign will demonstrate that your company is committed to contributing to a nature positive world. This will be used by businesses, policymakers, and other stakeholders to demonstrate the momentum for global business action on nature until 2030. After COP16 and working towards 2030, we hope to grow the number of companies who have submitted their nature strategies, but we will also be working and collaborating with businesses to go to the next phase and start delivering on the nature strategy by taking action to reduce negative impacts and increase the positive impacts. Over time, businesses will need to refine and update their nature strategy in line with evolving best practice. Through the It's Now for Nature campaign, we aim to showcase the growth and momentum for business action on nature during this period. So today our message is clear. We are calling on all businesses to get started on their nature journey. Develop and publish your board or C-suite approved nature strategy by COP16. And now I will hand over to PwC to take us through the details of the handbook as well as the development process. It is my pleasure to pass on and introduce Lynn Baber and Ben Matthews from PwC. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Michael. It is such a privilege to be here with you all today. I'm Lynn Baber, partner at PwC and head of PwC UK's sustainability practice. And I'm sure for everyone, like me, actually, nature is far, far more than just a business item. For me, it's an instinctive part of my life. And so I'm personally delighted that PwC UK is the official knowledge partner to the It's Now for Nature campaign, and that this campaign and strategy handbook can have a real impact for businesses and their impact on nature. We're all aware that the natural world provides essential resources and services that enable our societies and economies to thrive. If you trace the inputs for all industries back to their starting point, they all start with what we take from the ground, air, or water. And when nature is under threat, it has an impact on all of us. At PwC, we've made taking action on nature a core part of our strategy. And as part of this, we launched our global Centre for Nature Positive Business in April this year. The centre aims to help accelerate the global transition to a nature positive and net zero future, and unites more than 500 nature specialists from across our network, bringing together knowledge in biodiversity, water, forestry, regenerative agriculture, geospatial analysis, and so much more. As part of the centre, our team assessed the links between economic activity and nature ecosystems and found that an astonishing 55%, approximately $58 trillion of global GDP is dependent on nature. So nature is invaluable to business too. And at PwC, we want to help make our clients businesses of the future by assessing their relationship with nature and getting them to take action now. That's why we've helped develop the Nature Strategy Handbook to provide easy to understand guidance for businesses to start their nature strategy journey And so I'm delighted to now hand over to Ben, who will take you through the strategy handbook and bring it to life for you.
Great, thanks so much, Lynn and Michael. I'm Ben Matthews, a senior manager in the PwC UK sustainability team, and I've been working alongside Business for Nature to help develop the handbook. The purpose of the handbook is to provide businesses with a step-by-step guide on writing a nature strategy. This might be a standalone document for some businesses, but equally it might be included and integrated into other business, climate, or sustainability plans. As we were developing this handbook, we set out some key principles for what we wanted the handbook to be, to develop something which was neither too complex and technical nor too vague and high level. We also wanted to drive ambitious action, but ensure that it was accessible to all businesses with multiple entry points. Also, considering the growing number of frameworks and regulations, we wanted to build on as much existing guidance as possible. So why Act D? We've heard already Act D being mentioned by a few people, Tom and Michael. A clear direction to go from our starting point was to base the handbook around the Act D framework. For those of you who are not yet familiar with Act D, it refers to the high-level business actions on nature, which we've mentioned are assess, commit, transform, and disclose. These were developed in a collaboration including the Capitals Coalition, Business for Nature, WBCSD, TNFD, the Science Based Targets Network, the World Economic Forum, and WWF, and supported by many other key organizations as well. Act D provides a high-level guide to businesses through various tools, frameworks, and initiatives to support businesses in assessing their relationship with nature, setting targets, and taking actions to avoid and reduce negative impacts while restoring and regenerating nature. So this seemed like an excellent framing, which already existed, to house the strategy guidance recommendations. The handbook itself builds, as I've said, on the Act D by guiding businesses to use the actions to create a nature strategy. And we've broken down each action into the following 4 parts. So firstly, each high-level action is broken down into key steps that summarize the content of a nature strategy, and which I'll go into on the next slide. Secondly, under each step, we have a number of guiding questions to help businesses identify the information required to develop their nature strategy. I like to think of these almost like an agenda for a workshop on any of the Act D steps. Thirdly, recommendations suggest content that should be included within a credible nature strategy in response to the guiding questions. And finally, there is an external resources section included to support businesses in developing their nature strategy in line with the recommendations, and to show where you can get existing guidance if you need to dive deeper. So by breaking it down each of these actions into 4 parts, businesses can easily understand the steps which need to happen for a credible nature strategy, what that strategy should then include, and are signposted to resources that can help them get on their way. So now let me talk through what is actually covered by each of the famous Act D actions we've been talking about. So starting with the assess phase, this stage is all about understanding your business's relationship with nature. The basis of this is underpinned by step 1 in the top left, carrying out a materiality assessment, which helps businesses to narrow down multiple issues to the ones they need to focus on. Step 2 then explores measuring and evaluating the priority impacts to understand what actions will need to be taken and how these can be monitored over time. Step 3 then focuses on the nature-related risks and opportunities that your business faces as a result of the impacts and dependencies. And then the final step is all about how you've considered people and climate in your assessment. This step is really vital to ensure your strategy interlinks with the climate ambitions, and also that your nature-related actions benefit people and wider society, including important stakeholders such as Indigenous peoples and local communities. Secondly, in that orange row, we have commit. This stage is informed by some of the guiding questions within the assess stage and is all about what your business aspires to achieve through their strategy. Step 1 includes guidance on how to consider your business's ambition regarding nature, as well as how you plan to align to a nature-positive future. Now, ambition is one of the most important elements of a credible strategy and can really be seen as the propelling force behind any strategic initiative. Ambition will help get initiatives off the ground and subsequently enable them to gain momentum. So I almost see the ambition part as the headline of the nature strategy. After working out the overarching ambition of your business's action on nature, the second step is to set targets which will ensure that progress is made towards that ambition and that they can be tracked over time. The third step, potentially the core section of the handbook, is the transform section. Now you can see it's a bit longer, there's 6 steps here, but that's for good reason. There is significant action, as we've already heard, needed to halt and reverse nature loss by 2030. And businesses need to go beyond just assessment and disclosure. This is the section of your strategy which will demonstrate to internal and external stakeholders exactly what you are doing and what you plan to do to change the impacts your business is having on the natural world and how you're managing your nature-related risks and opportunities. So step 1 here addresses how your business is avoiding and reducing negative impacts on nature, including aspects of how this action is being monitored. Step 2 then explores what your business is doing on the positive impact side to restore and regenerate nature. How are these linked to your underlying impacts, dependencies, risks, and opportunities? And how are you as a business monitoring this action? The following 4 steps then move on to the process of how you plan to add to or alter your current business strategy and financial models to account for the changes needed to align your business to its overall nature ambition and achieve the targets which have been set. Now, this is obviously one of the more challenging aspects we understand of the nature strategy, and the handbook does provide key resources for each step, showing how you can transform your business model in this case. We've also included a step on value chain management, policy advocacy, and governance, which capture the supporting mechanisms a business requires to facilitate the transformation it has identified. Now, the final stage at the bottom there is disclose. This helps businesses to ensure their strategy is credible and aligns with major reporting requirements. Independent validation of targets will enhance the credibility of your strategy, and information on initiatives and accreditations will support your transformative actions. We're proposing that a credible nature strategy can actually be a better way of preparing your business for increasing reporting burden relating to sustainability, and that you can build a roadmap using this to meet future reporting requirements. Now, we're not asking companies to follow a specific framework here to be part of the campaign, but we have signposted in the resources section the different frameworks, including TNFD, SBTN, Nature Action 100, and other recommendations that provide the most detailed guidance to effectively meet the recommendations of the handbook. And these are all maps to the ACT-D steps, so they're very practical. Now, I realize this has been a whistle-stop tour, but we hope the new Nature Strategy Handbook provides a valuable resource to companies looking to begin or to build on their existing nature strategy. PwC, of course, are more than happy to discuss the handbook further, so please do reach out after this call if you have any further questions. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much, Michael, Lynn, Ben, and the rest of the team for, well, all of your leadership and your dedication. And now we're going to I'm going to hand over to my colleagues, John Sabet, who leads our business engagement, and also then Lucy Coast, who's our communications director, who will share how to join the campaign, how to amplify it. So over to you, John.
Thank you, Eva. I'm really excited to present how companies can join the campaign in practice. So I'll quickly walk us through 3 key points. A, the strategy submission process. B, the review process. And lastly, C, the minimum requirements. So as mentioned earlier, all businesses are encouraged to join the campaign by developing and submitting their nature strategy on the It's Now for Nature website. And we've really tried to make the submission process as straightforward as possible. So when you are ready to submit your company's nature strategy, you can do so via a simple online form on the It's Now for Nature website, which is the form that is showing on the left-hand side of your screen. Once you've uploaded your strategy, it will then go through a review process by Business for Nature, where our team will review the strategy against the minimum requirements. And finally, once approved, the strategies that meet the minimum requirements will be listed on the campaign's website. And this is when a company officially joins the Now for Nature campaign. And so now let me address the question that you're all asking yourself: what are the minimum requirements? Before we go through the requirements one by one, there are 2 key points I want to highlight. First, as mentioned earlier, the Now for Nature campaign will be a multi-phase campaign running all the way until 2030. So the requirements may evolve over time in line with emerging best practice. Second, the review will be a process-based assessment of whether the minimum requirements are indeed included in the submitted strategy, rather than an assessment of the content of the strategy per se. So with this, let's now look at the minimum requirements successively. For nature strategy to be published ahead of the COP16 on the It's Now for Nature website, it should include the following 4 minimum requirements. A materiality assessment to identify material impacts, dependencies, risks, and opportunities on nature. Smart targets aligned with these material impacts, dependencies, risks, and opportunities. Actions to achieve these smart targets, and in particular, to avoid and reduce negative impacts on nature. And lastly, C-suite or board approval of the strategy, as well as responsibility for its delivery. And so for those of you who have been listening intently, you'll notice that these requirements are aligned with the high-level actions that structure the Nature Strategy Handbook, i.e. to assess, commit, transform, and disclose your dependencies and impacts on nature. Some of you may be thinking, wow, this is quite ambitious. Well, that is precisely the campaign's objective. Ensuring that companies develop and submit credible and ambitious nature strategies and therefore contribute to halting and reversing nature loss by 2030, while also helping companies on that journey via the handbook. Of course, as mentioned earlier, the handbook is not the only resource available. On the contrary, it builds on many other resources. So as a final point, I'll simply emphasize once more all the resources developed across our coalition that are available for companies who are not yet ready to submit their strategies. For example, that includes WBCSD's Nature Positive Roadmaps, SBTN, TNFD framework with which the handbook and the campaign is aligned, as well as other key resources that will help companies with the next level of detail. So as mentioned earlier, you will find links to these resources at the end of the handbook, but you will also find them listed on the It's Now for Nature website. And you will also find on the website a full FAQ section on how to join the campaign and everything that I've presented right now. So I hope this has motivated all the companies on the line to develop and submit ambitious nature strategies and join the Now for Nature campaign. With this, I'll now hand over to my colleague Lucy, who will share some details on the campaign's next steps and the expected regional rollout.
Thank you so much, John. So we've covered a bit about the handbook. We've covered what to do if you're a company ready to submit your nature strategy. Today is the launch. Hopefully you'll notice that's the case on your social media feeds. Otherwise, I probably haven't done my job properly. So we've also launched a full campaign website today. So that's where the Nature Strategy Handbook is stored, where it's available in multiple languages, plus some questions and answers, which we might have to add to after today's webinar. But beyond today, we're really wanting to reach businesses in other regions over the next few months and into 2024. So starting with an event at COP28 in Dubai in December. So that'll be on the 5th of December. It will be live streamed, so useful for colleagues or other people you know who might appreciate learning more about the campaign and the handbook. And if you're on the ground, you can come and meet some of us in person. Then we're also hoping to expand our outreach elsewhere. So we're looking at hosting a webinar with our partner Ore in France, with partners WBCSD in the Asia Pacific region. We're also looking at having dedicated events, possibly in Hong Kong, India, China, and a Spanish language event in Latin America. And I think there's been a question about that in the chat. So lots going on. Not all of these dates are confirmed, but if you think you'd like to co-organize something with us in your region or work with us on one of these events, then we'd love to hear from you. So just the final thing to mention is we've developed a digital communications toolkit to support with the launch today. It contains the video that we played at the start, some quote cards, some social media assets, the research which was touched on as well. So much of this is translated and it's all unbranded. So anyone is welcome to use the content and share it. So I think that's all from me. So Eva, back to you in the studio, as they say.
Thanks so much, Lucy. Thanks, John. And now, in fact, it's my real pleasure to introduce Diane Holdorf, who's the Executive Vice President at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. She's going to be moderating our business panel now. So I'll invite Diane and all the panelists to put on their cameras so that Diane can kick it off. Over to you, Diane. Thanks so much.
Eva, thank you so much. And a huge congratulations to you and the entire Business for Nature team for this incredibly ambitious and inspiring campaign. I am convinced that Now for Nature is going to do for business action what we were able to collectively accomplish going into the GBF in Montreal almost this time last year. As was already stated, there was an unprecedented suite of tools that were issued in September that provide the level of support needed for the types of actions that this campaign requires to demonstrate what having a meaningful nature strategy looks like. So, and WBCSD, of course, was happy to be behind that, providing a lot of the detailed guidance in partnership with everybody who has been listed here. This is going to take effort and lift from all of us. And this kind of team effort is also in and of itself almost unprecedented in this space. The good news is we've got leading companies who are already taking this kind of action and who are here today to share with us what they've learned on this journey and the work that they've done. So incredibly excited to welcome Hannah Green, Director of Corporate Responsibility from GSK, Tim Christofferson, VP of Climate Action for Salesforce, Marcelo Behar, VP of Sustainability and Group Affairs for Natura & Co., and Sebastian Solil, Global Head of Energy Transition and Environment for BNP. Hi, all. So great to have you here today. Very excited to have a very speed round conversation around what you've learned and what this has looked like as you've led your companies through the development of nature strategies. So the first question you probably had to battle is why? Why should companies develop a nature strategy? And maybe, Hannah, I'll come to you first. From GSK's perspective, how does having a nature strategy help build the long-term business resilience that's so important? And I need you to come off mute. First to go, someone's got to do it.
Yeah. Thank you, Diane, and thank you for the invitation. Really excited to be here with so many people today. So at GSK, we actually set our nature strategy back in 2020. And when we did that, there were really 3 clear reasons. And that was because action on nature matters for climate change, it matters for human health, and it matters for long-term business success. So GSK is a global biopharma company, and our purpose is to positively impact the health of billions of people. And we unfortunately can see ever more clearly that the twin impacts of both climate change and nature loss are really impacting human health. So there's a real imperative there for us to act on nature to help achieve our purpose as a business. There's also the aspect of business resilience. So again, it's becoming more clear that we need to protect nature to secure long-term business resilience. So as an innovative biopharma company, we know that innovation can often actually be inspired by nature. Scientists can find new solutions by observing processes in the natural world, for example. And at the same time, like many companies, protecting nature can help to ensure the ongoing supply of the raw materials that we need to manufacture our products, which in our case are vital medicines and vaccines. So just to give you one practical example of this that I think really brought it to life for us at GSK, is that we know that many of our suppliers of active pharmaceutical ingredients, which are clearly very critical to our business and to making medicines and vaccines, many of those suppliers are located in highly water-stressed regions. And we also know that water manufacturing those ingredients is highly water intensive. So delivering the water targets that we've set as part of our nature strategy is actually really going to help secure the long-term supply chain resilience for those key ingredients.
That's great. Hannah, it's so cool, right? So from GSK's perspective, not only is it core to innovation and therefore future performance, but it's also core to delivering on these targets that have been set and how the business progresses against those. So makes great sense. I'm going to come, Tim, to you next in Salesforce. A nature strategy for Salesforce may not be what everybody thinks of as a leading opportunity. So how is having a nature strategy contributing for Salesforce, and how are you linking it perhaps with your climate strategies?
Thanks, Diane. We decided to fuse our nature positive strategy, which was launched in April of this year, onto our climate action plan, which was already in play. And we follow a strict mitigation hierarchy on climate. We have a 50% reduction target by 2030. That's our top priority. And at the same time, we feel nature-based solutions can contribute significantly to speeding up our collective climate action as companies. Nature can deliver, as we all know, up to 1/3 of the solution to mitigation, but of course, it also pays a double dividend on resilience and on many other ecosystem services. So in recognition of this, we saw the need to build a cohesive nature positive strategy integrated with our climate action plan. And there's much more detail in the strategy than I could put here in 2 minutes. So please download our strategy. Anybody, if you would like to learn more, there's also a lessons learned chapter in it. But basically, it has 3 pillars: reducing our own nature impacts, leading on global restoration at scale with 1T.org, the Trillion Trees Initiative. Forests for us are our signature investment vehicle for climate and nature action that also benefits people. And the 3rd pillar is accelerating our customers, our 200,000 companies globally and public sector customers we have, onto the nature positive journey. Our strategy bundles a couple of commitments. We have a $100 million grant fund for ecosystem restoration and climate justice. We committed to purchase at least 1 million tons of blue carbon by 2025. And we want to conserve and restore an additional 100 million trees by 2030.
That's great.
But all of that, of course, goes beyond mitigating risk. We also see this as a way for value creation. So it is good business sense for all of us to invest in nature.
I like, Tim, how Salesforce has so clearly aligned it to your climate strategy, and as an example of how to deliver for both and why both are so important, and how you've open sourced the ways that you've gone about doing that. So everybody check that out as well. Thank you. Marcelo, let me come over to you next. For Natura, we can probably envision why this is so core to the business, much like what Hannah was saying. But you've had so much experience in this, also involving and engaging stakeholders. How have you been doing that? What have you been learning through that process as you've started to implement the nature strategy?
Hello, everyone, and hello, Diana. It's great to be among friends and between our stakeholders. I think we are building many things together with each and every one of you and your institutions, and glad to see so many people watching this amazing event from Business for Nature, and to help to expand the practices that we are trying to connect here and to make this more broad to different sectors, countries, etc. Greetings from warm São Paulo. We are here preparing ourselves for a series of events. So G20 will be coming, BRICS conference, and then COP30 in Brazil. So stakeholder engagement is really important. I think the lesson that we learned from the first COP that happened here in Brazil, the Earth Conference back in '92, was the importance to engage with traditional communities, the ones who own over 80% of the world biodiversity, and the ones who are really taking care of nature in a way that it's not only ourselves planning how we are going to use nature, but building with them something that will make sense for them and for the cycles of nature that are not always aligned with the business and the commercial cycles. So some adjustments and some translation is always needed. And I think what we are proud of is that we move away from not only sourcing correctly and ethically, which is something everyone must do, but also working with the communities on new bioingredients. So moving away from commodities, bringing new elements from nature in a way that we can build value out of it. So nowadays we operate with 39 different bioingredients with species, seeds, and fruits like murumuru, like ukuuba, tucumã, many of those that people have never really tasted or heard of, that have unique properties and that can have a lot of business sense. So they create and they add a lot of value for us and for the communities. And we have targets to improve from 39 ingredients to 55. We have targets on nature coverage that those elements will bring to the Amazon region, where we operate very intensely for the last 10 years. And we also have targets of the number of people and resources that will be allocated on nature. So as Tim said, I cannot disclose everything in 2 minutes. So if you want, you can please download our commitment to life with each one of the targets of the pillars. We are glad to share and to discuss with all of you.
So inspiring to hear the innovation that's coming through as a result of this strategy. But Marcelo, the point I want to really come back and drill in on that is incredibly important on the nature agenda, even more so than on the climate agenda, where it's also critical, is the examples that you shared about engaging the people who steward the resources that we're talking about conserving and protecting, and engaging the indigenous communities in the solution and the innovation and the opportunities that it therefore creates for them. We have got to keep that front and center as well. And I'm sure we'll revisit that in just a minute. But before we go back, before we move on, Sebastian, without the finance sector engaged in this, it's hard to see how we drive the true volume of momentum that's needed. So how does BNPP consider a company's understanding of its material nature impacts, dependencies, risks, and opportunities, the DIRO framework that we need to be considering here when you're making investment decisions?
Yes, thank you, Diane. Good afternoon, everybody. So yes, as you know, in BNP Paribas was really convinced that natural related risks and opportunities are very significant, and we've been committed to preserving biodiversity for several years. And for us, it's very important to be able to assess the natural related DIROs, so dependencies, impacts, risks, and opportunities of both our clients and the companies in which we invest. So we have implemented for years ways to assess what our clients and what our investees do on the natural related issues. So to give you an example, I can detail briefly what we do on the banking side. So for our banking clients, for our corporate clients, we have developed an in-house assessment tool. It's called the ESG assessment. So it's a series of ESG-related questionnaires that covers the main ESG topics for each sector. We have 19 sectors, I think. And these questionnaires include a few natural-related questions as well. And the number of natural-related questions depends on the sector. So for instance, for the agriculture sector, you have quite a lot of natural-related questions. For other sectors, you have less natural-related questions, but you have natural-related questions more or less for all the sectors. And so with this sector, we try to evaluate several things. So first thing, to what extent our corporate clients are aware of the material natural related risk, and so whether they comply with our sector policies, our sector policies on natural related issues, and to what extent the strategies to manage sector-specific natural risk are relevant, sufficient, and these kind of things. And it's very important for us because actually the main job of a banker is to assess risk, to evaluate risk. And so we really need to get to more what our clients do to be able to assess the risk in general and on natural in particular.
That's great, Sebastian. So what you're showing actually is that it's to a company's advantage to have a clear nature strategy because there are already assessment tools like the one that you've just clarified that are digging in deeper to understand how companies are prepared for the risks that nature responds. So a big win for having a robust nature strategy. And that's where I want to just circle back in our last few minutes and to help everybody who's participating here understand a little bit more on how did you actually develop your strategy? What were the steps that you took? And there's so many questions around how did you determine what was material? So if we can get one more quick speed round, I'm going to come back to you, Tim, first, because obviously yours is up in public and you've got the lessons learned piece there, but anything that you can highlight in particular about how you've developed the strategy and how this could help companies move forward?
So first of all, for all of us, this will remain work in progress because there's new guidance coming out. The cost of biodiversity monitoring is dropping fast. The technology is exploding. So this will remain work in progress. My main message to other companies would be don't wait for the perfect, because as soon as you start, you will find out there's lots of help from networks like Business for Nature, WBCSD. You can always come to any of the companies here, ask what we did in detail, and then also seek networks, not only for building the strategy, but also for action. So when you invest, we do that through the Trillion Trees, and just this year launched another effort called the Global Mangrove Breakthrough. So there's now over 50 companies joining forces to conserve and restore an additional 15 million hectares of mangroves. That's a $4 billion collective lift. That's nothing that one company can do alone, or one government. So join forces with others. There's lots of help out there. We've spoken to over 200 companies ourselves, including through a webinar series on this topic that's still ongoing, that we have to share our lessons learned. But don't wait, start today.
That's great. So don't wait, use the rich resources and tools that already exist, engage with others to leverage that learning and get going. Really important. That's super helpful. Hannah, let me come to you next. What were some of the quick lessons learned within GSK as you put the strategy together?
So I think for us, I would echo what Tim said about getting started, and the way we really operationalized that was really to take a two-pronged approach. It was to get started on what we call no regret actions, the areas where we think we have the most impact, while at the same time continuing to deepen our understanding of our material impacts and dependencies, get better supply chain traceability, and also keep evolving our approach as external guidance evolved as well. But you need to do both at the same time. You can't wait for perfection to start taking action. That'd be my first point. I guess the second would be use the tools and resources that are out there. This handbook that Business for Nature are publishing is going to be hugely helpful to pull everything together. But we've also been piloting the TNFD guidance and the SBTN methodology, and kind of each of those kind of relatively aligned and build on each other. So again, just get started, and you can kind of start peeling back the layers of the onion in terms of your own understanding. Finally, we also published our updated strategy in September last year, which builds on everything that we've learnt. So people can see that on our website, along also with some lessons learned, because I think that's so important that as a community, we keep sharing our findings and kind of help each other progress with this.
Absolutely. So like Tim said, leverage resources that are there. These companies have things publicly available for you to look to learn from. Great tools with very technical guidance and details from WBCSD, tremendous powerful resources from Business for Nature across a huge number of sectors, lots of resources out there. And to the point of materiality, Hannah, as you said, just get started on what you know is most important. And I think that's a key message. Tim, it builds a little bit on what you said about don't wait, but sometimes it's don't wait to do what. And so to know what's material, you're not going to maybe get through an exhaustive materiality assessment, but it's going to be clear, Hannah, what I heard from you. What are some of the most material impacts? Where can we therefore get started now? So key message is to help prioritize what can otherwise be an overwhelmingly complex space if you're undertaking that sort of assessment for the first time within an organization. So thanks for breaking it down just a little bit more and for sharing that your information is out there publicly as well. With that, Marcelo, let me come over to you. Where, Natura, again, has been on this journey for quite a long time. What have you learned, in addition to what you've shared already? Click us down in a little bit more detail, how you've done that materiality, how it's fed into the actions that you've taken, and where you've seen some of that real business opportunity come through.
So I think materiality, governance are super connected, right? So it's important not only for your stakeholders and your employees, the suppliers, your supply chain, the communities that you source from, and your consumers, because at the end, nature must be valued And people could taste different flavors and different species and different possibilities on everything that they purchase. And so understanding what is important for those stakeholders, it's fundamental. But I think it's important to connect what is important for them with what you're doing and how this is accountable. And then you have governance being set with all the targets that we've mentioned on a vision that has very clear KPIs. But there is another task, which I think is important for everyone that's listening to us, which is the governance from the board beyond. So the governance, as you were mentioning here, aligning all the frameworks, all the objectives. So initiatives like this one are the ones that are putting together different perspectives, and this will be super important. And the only two elements that I haven't heard yet, and I think they will be important more and more, are the public policy element. And with COP15, I think now we have, each country has the opportunity to review its strategic goals, and this will create also the alignment between the materiality on a national level, on a company level, on a consumer level. And the other one is aligning with science. And I think we do have already well-established science for carbon emission. And what we see in Natura and what we've been discussing with research centers here in Brazil, also in Europe, in the US, is that the science for nature still needs some improvement for us to be able to compare with the same knowledge and the same capabilities that we do on the climate agenda, everything we do on the nature agenda. But it's coming, and initiatives like this are helping the way to get there.
Absolutely, Marcelo. Thank you. You're right to say it is coming, and we're learning a lot from the journey on climate and the systems that are in place now on climate as we build that replicability where we can within companies. And that's something that each of you have referred to a little bit, following those same performance and accountability systems that you've put together for climate, adding nature into those and showing how you solve for both while leveraging the systems that you've built and those that are developing externally really help also, and will be an accelerator for this. Sebastian, 1 minute response. If you were looking at these companies for investment and taking into consideration what you've heard from the strategies, how does it resonate with what a bank like or a finance sector in the bank part of BNPP would be looking for?
Yes, I think it resonated very well, and I completely agree with the key learning points. I think first thing is prioritization. What is material, because we know that for our company, we cannot address all the natural volatility issues, but in one sector of activity, there is a few very significant natural volatility issues. So prioritizing is very key. Getting started, we know we don't expect our clients and the companies in which we invest to have a full 100% perfect strategy. That doesn't make sense, but it's very important for them to show that yeah, they are aware of the issues and they are addressing them. And a third thing that is very important is C-suite involvement. We have a strategy. We committed as BNP Paribas under the framework of the Act for Nature initiative, and this so in this framework we took commitments on natural related topics, and these commitments were due to be signed by the CEO. And obviously it's much more efficient when the CEO sign natural related commitments and show to the whole company that okay, it's an important topic for CXCO. So yes, and I think I'm definitely think that the handbook of Business for Nature can help greatly in this field, because from what I've seen, it's and from what has been said, it's complex enough to cover quite globally the natural related issues, but simple enough to be used by companies that are not completely specialists of biodiversity, because okay, we know that Natura & Co, you know very well biodiversity, but
yep.
For instance, that many other companies know much less on biodiversity.
Absolutely. So we've got to use these tools to help us cut through that complexity and get to some simple solutions that get us started. Amazing input from all of you. Thank you so much. With that, Eva, I'm going to turn it back over to you with a huge thank you to our group here who's been able to share their lessons learned.
Thank you so much, Diane. Thanks to all the great panelists as well. We're just going to go to Q&A. Before we do, we had a little special 2-minute few words from Paul Polman, business leader, campaigner, and co-author of Net Positive. and then we'll launch a poll and have the Q&A. So stay tuned. Over to Paul.
Well, hello, everybody, and thank you so much for inviting me to make some remarks today. And I'm sorry I can't be with you in person. I'm sure I'm speaking to the converted here by saying that the world faces some big challenges. Our pattern of economic growth, development, production and consumption are pushing the planet's life support systems beyond their natural boundaries. The facts are that climate action and the protection, restoration and sustainable use of nature go hand in hand. Scaling up business actions on nature is now a global policy and regulatory priority, and it's a business critical issue, posing significant long-term risks if not acted upon. The costs that we are incurring currently because of the destruction of biodiversity are significantly higher than what it would cost us to prevent the issues in the first place. Now that makes it such an attractive business opportunity for all of us. The launch of It's Now for Nature to help companies set a credible nature strategy is certainly welcome and much needed. It's a real milestone in moving from the why to the how for business as well as financial institutions. And it's fully complementary to the work of the Science Based Targets Network and the Task Force on Nature-related Financial Disclosure. And yes, it certainly makes good business sense to ensure that decision-making for nature sits at the highest possible level within companies. And it's not merely a sticking plaster, but a commitment to transform how you do business. Now, why is that so important? Well, because this is what investors will ask you for. It is what governments will regulate business for. And it's what your workforce expects from you. Being clear in your ambitions and showing how you are putting words into action is likely to benefit your business in the longer term. Business as usual is no longer an option. Nature and climate must go hand in hand as central and strategic decision-making issues at the heart of a company. This is how we will deliver a nature-positive world. I thank you for what you are doing, and I certainly look forward to following your efforts as part of this campaign.
Excellent. Thank you so much to all of you. Now we're going to go into the Q&A. There's also a poll just to hopefully we've provided with the right level of information that you were hoping from this webinar. So please, can we launch the poll so we can get a sense check from those on the line? And as we do that, I'm already going to, there have been fantastic questions coming through. So please just bear with me as I have a look at some of the key ones. There were ones on, I can't open my, what's going on? Apologies, I've lost the, here we go. I think the top one that we're going to try and get through a few here. We're going to try and cover Indigenous peoples. Marcelo, if it's okay, I'm going to come to you on that. A lot of points about how the strategies are going to be reviewed. That's a process question for Michael to take, and the importance of transparency. We're going to cover materiality that came a lot, and Ben, I'm going to come to you on that, and also just questions around challenges of getting your C-suite involved. How do you translate strategy into action? Maybe come to Hannah and to Tim. If we can, we'll get to data, and maybe Sebastian can cover those. So great questions. Let's go with it. So first of all, Marcelo, really important question from Charlotte. Do Indigenous peoples have a seat at the table in regards to reviewing strategies and ensuring that they are delivered correctly?
That's really a great question. And when we built our Amazon program, we had a seat for traditional communities within it. So it was built together with them. But more important than only have a seat on the table for reviewing processes is to have a constant relationship with them. Because it's not only about setting targets, but also about building new technologies. Because to source correctly from nature, you need to review the way that we source. So that's the constant dialogue, helping them to live in a better way, to pay for access for benefit sharing, something that was predicted in many different protocols, and Natura has been doing that for 16 years. I think working on a constant basis, adding value for both sides is fundamental.
Thanks so much, Marcelo. And I guess that for Natura in that way has had a long track record. So probably many other companies could and should learn from you and from other resources that are available. But certainly in the handbook, we emphasize that when you develop your strategy, you must go through a stakeholder engagement. So thank you so much for that question, Charlotte, really important. And I might just add that at the Biodiversity COP15 in December, there were 2 key stakeholders that negotiators said were finally having a stronger voice, going in the right direction. And one was the indigenous peoples and local communities, and then business and finance was finally represented, calling for the right thing. So thank you for that. And now if we can move on to this whole point about just the process of how the strategies will be reviewed as part of the campaign. And if we can provide more transparency on that, I'll just hand over to you, Michael, please, from Titus and Carly in particular. Thanks for those.
Yes, thank you very much, Eva. And very quickly, as we mentioned earlier, when we were presenting about how you joined the campaign, what we will be doing in terms of reviewing strategies that will be submitted is a process-driven review. So we will essentially be looking at whether a company have, one, developed the materiality assessment, whether they have set the targets, whether they are, developing actions, and whether their strategy is board or C-suite approved. We're not going to essentially look at the content or the details of those individual asks, but look at the process that these components of a nature strategy are there. We do have other partners, CDP, World Benchmarking Alliance, and others who will be doing all the benchmarking and looking at the credibility and the details of this strategy. So from a Business for Nature perspective, we'll only be checking whether a company has all of these components as part of the minimum requirements to be part of that campaign and the momentum it brings.
Thanks, Michael. And that will be the Business for Nature team with oversight from our decision-making body, which is called the Leadership Group of 12 of our partner organizations. Great, here are the poll results. So here we have good results in terms of thank you so much for saying you'll use or share the handbook. Thanks for the reminder by pulling up the results. That's fantastic. And then also a really strong reaction to expecting to join It's Now for Nature if you have a strategy. So thank you so much. Of course, it is early days. We only just launched today. So thanks for those really positive signals. Great, Michael. We will pick up now the next question. There are a bunch of questions around materiality and what we mean by this in the handbook and what are the major components. And so maybe Ben, I can come to you from a technical perspective if you have some reactions, please. Are you? Yes, you're there. Great.
Yeah. Thanks.
Oh, a bit crackly for me. Is that
sorry,
just
my
me?
internet's just suddenly decided to. I'm not.
Do you know what, Ben? Well, I'll come
think
back
that's
to you. I'll come back to you in a couple minutes. We do have time. I'll move
Sure.
on to the next
Yeah.
one, and then you can see. Great. So the next one was really questions, Melanie and others. Thank you so much on, further guidance from the companies of how do you engage different departments? How can you get your C-suite get this on the agenda of your C-suite? And also then I think there was a question about how do you translate the nature and climate strategy actually into action. So there are 2 points about implementing a strategy and getting buy-in. And maybe Hannah and Tim, I can come to both of you in turn. So Tim, you're up first. Over to you. Thanks.
In our case, the C-suite put it on our agenda, so we didn't have that. But what I would suggest is also for other companies to consider is to start bottom up at the same time. So Salesforce has 14,000 staff, for example, who are organized in Earth Force. So these are colleagues who volunteer for nature and for climate action. And they work in all kinds of departments. So it's not always useful to go straight or only to the top. I also wanted to reflect on this question of data. Is there enough data? I don't think that's an excuse for anybody to say we don't have enough data to act. That's the business we're in at Salesforce. We have tools for this. There is definitely enough data, more than enough, on climate change. There is a growing body of data and tools on nature. And if you have any lack of tools, please let me know. There's definitely enough data and also management tools out there to take action.
Thanks so much, Tim. That's a very strong statement. And maybe we will come back to it. Hannah, do you have any views on getting C-suite on board and also translating the strategy into action?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I think about this in two ways. I think what was successful for us at GSK was really learning the lessons from the much longer process that we went through in terms of integrating climate action into the business and using that to shortcut to get nature on the agenda. So really trying to present it to the business as not two separate strategies, but one integrated strategy with the same governance and the same mechanisms, the same links to executive remuneration. So you use all those mechanisms that are already in the business and insert nature into it. But then on the other hand, I would also say I think it's important to recognize what is different about nature to climate, because in that difference, I think, comes opportunity. So I would say the two things that really resonated for us is people kind of connect with nature in a way that perhaps they don't for climate, and you can really use that in terms of influence. So for us as an R&D led organization, we've seen such a lot of kind of passion and enthusiasm coming from the kind of scientific community, who kind of have a kind of close relationship with like observing the natural world. So that was a real in for us, I would say. And the other angle, which is a very different from climate and nature, is that climate is a kind of very global phenomenon, whereas nature is very local. So you can, again, similar to what Tim was saying, we're a large global company. People live in lots of different countries, have very different experience of nature. So then again, you can tap into a kind of much more local, much more relevant, context-specific kind of type of conversation.
Thanks so much, Hannah. Thanks. Really, really helpful framing. I'm going to try Ben again on materiality. So there were lots of questions. How do we consider materiality in the framework and what we mean by it? Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, thanks, Eva. Hopefully I'm back now. I'm not surprised at all. This is such a popular topic. Obviously one that was also touched on by our panelists quite a few times. Key thing about materiality really is all about prioritization, and that's why it's that first step. So what are the impacts and dependencies that mean the most for your organization, but also what are the ones that mean the most for nature and the external stakeholders that are reading your strategy? Double materiality is obviously a very key concept while you're thinking about this. And that's the concept of thinking not just about your financial materiality, but also what is material for nature and society. And that's in line with GRI, Natural Capital Protocol, TNFD and others as well. Once you can understand those initial biggest impacts and dependencies, you can then start to transform your business. As I mentioned earlier, there's plenty of reference information and external resources. So we'd encourage you to look at that particular step and look at the resources that we've laid out.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Ben. So we're just on time. So to wrap up, of course, I'd like to thank everyone. We've heard over and over a few times that the first step is the hardest, and no strategy is going to be perfect, no action absolutely perfect. We're talking about complex systems. We can't be paralyzed, though, for striving for perfection. We can't be paralyzed by the complexity. The only thing for sure that you can do if you're not doing right is if you're not doing anything, because we already know what some of the steps are in the direction of travel and the urgency to act right now. None of us can do this alone. None of us have the skills, the experience, the knowledge, the tools, but we can all do this together. This is a collective effort. We have built the momentum. We're continuing to build the momentum. Let's make It's Now for Nature and strategies the norm, and let's accelerate in an exponential way to COP16 and beyond. Thank you so much, all of you, for taking the time. All the very best. Bye-bye.